Connected to the server. Okay, we're on. Yeah. See, we're about to start. We have participants. 6. Oops. All right. I think we're good. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Sales Acceleration Method webinar, a Launch and Learn webinar from the Launchpad at the University of Miami. My name is Enrique Triay. I'm the Venture Consulting Manager at the Launchpad. The Launchpad was established in 2008. It houses a community of over 5,000 entrepreneurs affiliated to the University of Miami. They try to bring ideas to life, and we provide one-on-one consulting to our clients, workshops, and webinars such as this one, and mentorship programs as well. Today, our speaker is Richard Mcdonald. He's an entrepreneur in residence at the Launchpad. He's also an instructor and mentor at 500 Startups, a Silicon Valley venture capital firm. He's going to be bringing to us today the learnings he has accumulated over years of experience at Cisco Systems and PricewaterhouseCoopers. In order to keep things tight and to make time efficient for everybody, we have recorded Dick's presentation. It's a 20-minute recording. I'm going to be playing it now, and then we're going to open it up for questions. Please use the link at the bottom to put in your questions as they come up. And after the video is done, I'm going to open it up again. I'm going to look at the questions and look you up in the attendees list. And to keep things more engaged, I'm going to allow you to speak directly to Dick and ask the questions and engage directly. So I'm going to be looking around for the people that put the questions in. I'm going to be enabling their microphone so that you can talk and ask the question directly. Hopefully, within, 12:25, 12:30, we'll be ready for that. And then we're going to run questions through 1 o'clock. So that's the plan. That's the game plan. Again, thank you very much for joining. Get ready and enjoy the webinar.
Did you know that the #2 reason why startups fail is because they fail to sell their product effectively and they run out of cash? Hi, my name is Richard Mcdonald, and today I'd like to talk to you about something I call the Sales Acceleration Method. What is this method? It's a product of my 30 years of experience in entering markets, growing practices, selling product, but to do it in a very efficient and effective way. Its real origins are when I first joined PricewaterhouseCoopers many years ago as a young consultant when we were just beginning to enter that market. And in the span of only 10 years, we built ourselves up into such a size, we were able to sell ourselves to IBM for $3.5 billion. So you can imagine the rocket ship ride that was. But in the process of doing that, we learned a great many things on how to be very efficient and effective in approaching the market and selling our services and building up our client base and also our revenue. So as a tagline to the Sales Acceleration Method, you'll see the statement, make money while you sleep. And that's something when we were starting consulting at PwC, we asked ourselves almost every day, how do we make money while we sleep? And it wasn't just a catchy phrase or a cute saying. What it really meant was, how do we become very efficient in what we do where it could operate on its own or while we were sleeping? So that's really the trick here. So in sales, you can be incredibly person dependent and burn up a lot of time on a personal level, but you need to think about approaching the market so that you can leverage what you do, what you know, and how you approach your customers so that sales can occur while you sleep. And we'll talk a lot more about that as we get to the latter stages of what I call the sales acceleration method. So let me answer 3 questions that may be running around in your head right now. The first one is, why is this important to you? Secondly, what's unique about this method? And thirdly, what will you take away from this lecture series? Well, to the first question, as I mentioned already, the number 2 reason why startups fail is because they fail to sell their product and they run out of cash. And of course, that begs the question, what's the number 1 reason why startups fail? Well, it's because they do not build a product that actually meets a market need. What's unique about this method? As I mentioned, it's very efficient and effective, and it incorporates the best of what I've learned over 30 years, and it doesn't have any fluff in it or theoretical things or extra steps. It hones right in on what's super effective in getting the team aligned and selling your product in the most efficient and effective way. And it also incorporates some of the latest research from Bain & Company, where they've identified the 30 things that customers really value when they make any purchase decision. So before this research came out, we were doing this implicitly, but this research really helps us hone our selling approach and skills as we address the market to sell our product. And the last question, what are you going to take away from this lecture series? Well, it's really 4 parts. There's a framework I'm going to go over that helps you make sure you're targeting the right customers. The second thing is another method that allows you to develop a highly effective value proposition. Thirdly, there's a manner in which you will learn to identify your buyers, tell a compelling story, and then activate your buyers into customers. And lastly, this methodology makes sure that your company is aligned so that everyone is working on the same process, approach, and targets so that you're as efficient, as effective as you can be at driving sales of your product and driving revenue into your business. So here's the agenda. Like I said, this is going to be a series of lectures, and in fact 5 lectures that we'll use to cover the sales acceleration method. And these lectures are not going to be long. They're going to be in 15 or 20-minute chunks to allow you to absorb the material easily and effectively. So in this first lecture today, what I'm going to go through are answering 4 key questions to set the context of the sales acceleration method. The first question is, why are sales so hard to grow? It's always a challenge. It's always a process. It's always something in the way of getting more and more sales. There's a couple of significant reasons for that you need to be aware of so that you can make sure you address them as you go forward. We'll talk about that. What is product market fit? In the VC world, where I'm also an instructor at 500 startups the last several years, everyone talks about product market fit. Everyone wants to invest in a company that has product market fit. What is this thing, product market fit? And I've seen oodles of definitions. I want to give you a very simple one so that we make sure we set the table here as far as what we're talking about to achieve product market fit and then to accelerate sales from there. And then the third question is, how do you know when you have product market fit? So there's a quick test on that. It's also what VCs look for. And lastly, how does achieving product market fit and the sales acceleration method relate? And they relate in very powerful ways, by the way. And we leverage the same concepts that are needed to achieve product market fit, and we carry them forward into the sales acceleration method, which you'll see as we go through the latter parts. So the first question, why are sales so hard to grow? So the top graph on this slide illustrates that sales are very tough to grow. And this graph is from the Federal Reserve System as published in the Harvard Business Review article that I quote below. But what it shows is the length of time it takes these products to actually penetrate U.S. households. And what's interesting is that these products, one, are what I would classify as must-haves in the sense that they're a refrigerator, a microwave, a color TV, the internet, the personal computer, cell phones, et cetera, et cetera. And you can see it takes quite a bit of time for them to penetrate the market. And what I did down below is I just plotted for these products how many years it took just to reach 60% of U.S. households. So for example, the color TV took 20 years. The dishwasher took 63 years just to reach 60% of U.S. households. The VCR, 12 years. The cell phone, 26 years. The personal computer, 29 years, etc. Although the pace of change is getting more fast, it still takes a considerable amount of time. And then the question is, why? Why is it so hard? So this first answer, and the major answer, is that it comes down to psychology. It turns out there's a segment of the population, a minority of the population, that are early adopters or innovators. And they love buying new things, and they don't mind that it doesn't work perfectly. These are typically the first types of people who buy a startup product. But in order to grow and reach the vast majority of consumers, you have to sell to what Jeffrey Moore in his book Crossing the Chasm calls pragmatists or conservatives. And as you start to sell to those, that's a very different approach. It has to be very efficient, very honed, and must penetrate and zero in on the needs of this group before they even become interested in buying your product. So our next question, what is this thing called product market fit? We hear it all the time. Venture capitalists love it. They keep asking people, do you have product market fit? How close are you to product market fit? Et cetera, et cetera. So let me take you through a simple definition of what product market fit is, at least the definition that I like. So the definition of product market fit that I like is a very simple one, and I like to keep things simple. It is this: product market fit is the degree to which a product satisfies a strong demand. So product market fit is the degree to which a product satisfies a strong demand. So let's unpack that a little bit. So let's start with strong demand. What does that mean? Well, it means you have to have a large customer segment that has a significant need. That creates a strong demand. A small customer segment with a significant need, that's a small demand. And vice versa. A large customer segment with a minor need, that's still a small demand. So we need a large customer segment that has a significant need that creates a strong demand. The second part, satisfies. Well, that's stating whether or not your product meets that need. And the third part, the degree, is of course how well your product meets that strong demand or meets the need in that large customer segment that's creating the strong demand. So those are the elements. Keep those in mind. This is what every startup strives for. I need to achieve product market fit. So if I represent this pictorially, this product market fit, it sounds simple. Here I have a product. There's some kind of functional need that I'm addressing in this large customer segment. And once I do that by tweaking my product, voila, I have product market fit and I'm off to the races. But not so fast. Tweaking your product actually can be pretty tough. And as I mentioned at the outset, the number one reasons why startups fail is they create a product that doesn't have a market need. So they go through all these iterations and they actually don't hit the spot of a large customer segment's need. So they will go through iterations of this, and occasionally they'll do a pivot. And keep in mind, a pivot isn't easy. And a pivot isn't something you really want to do because it means I'm kind of throwing away everything I did before and I'm kind of starting anew. That's a pivot. So very tough. This is the challenge. Everyone recognizes that. And that's why people work so hard on getting their product through a variety of iterations with customers to make sure that, can I develop a product that meets the need in this large customer segment? But adding to the difficulty is I could be creating a product and I might be targeting it to one large customer segment that may not have a need for that particular product. So I actually have to pay attention to what customer segment I'm chasing. So I have three variables going on here. I have the product variable going on. I have the functional need that I'm addressing coming off the product. And then I have the large customer segment. So wow, that's a lot of moving parts. And hence why product market fit is so challenging and why VCs are so interested in examining, do you have product market fit yet? And then adding even more difficulty to this whole environment of product market fit is this large data sets that are available. And one of the things we see often, and it's been written about, is that just because you have a data scientist and you can draw correlations between customers who buy something and what they bought, and therefore you might be saying, oh, there's a correlation there. That must be what I need to build as far as features and functions, because I can draw that correlation. So it might be, for example, people who buy BMWs, 540s, they wear jeans and they live in this particular area and they like baseball caps and they generally wear blue or pink shirts. The problem is what we're finding out is that correlation does not equal causation. What does that mean? It means just because there's a correlation there doesn't mean you've identified why they've purchased the product in the first place. And that's very important to understand when you're trying to achieve product market fit. So, is there a way to actually improve the odds of achieving product market fit in this helter-skelter environment of trying to achieve product market fit? Well, it turns out there is. So to do that, it requires you to think differently and ask a key question of yourself and of your company and of your product. And that question is, what job is my customer hiring my product to do? So you actually have to put yourself in your customer's shoes, which we emphasize all the time at 500 startups to make sure we're achieving product market fit. And then look back, but ask the key question, what is my customer hiring my product to do? And when you do that, we discover things that not only are their functional needs to be met when people buy things, but there's very powerful social and emotional needs that have to be met as well. So we want to make sure we identify them to have a successful product and therefore an successful sale of that product into the marketplace. So let me give you an example. In this example, there was a condominium company that targeted their condominiums on a nice golf course that was targeting downsizers, people who either got divorced or were reaching retirement and they wanted to downsize into a smaller place, but still have a nice place. So these were affordable but luxury condominiums that seemed to be ideally suited for this group, according to the research. And they did have a data scientist draw all the correlations. What do we need? What's the correlation for people who are buying these types of condominiums? And they found, well, large bay windows was one aspect. Marble countertops was another aspect. A large second bedroom for people to come visit and stay. So they built their condominiums to what the data scientist had correlated what was needed as far as features in these condominiums. But what happened was sales were dramatically lower than what they expected. So they had to start to investigate why. What they found out as they started to go through this questioning and understanding their customers better and not just relying on these correlations, but they found out something very important, and that the sale of these condominiums was dependent on the dining room table. You say, the dining room table, what do you mean? Well, of course, it turns out as we grow up, when we have a house and a family or any type of relationships, we use the dining room table as the center point for family conversations, doing homework, discussions, important meals like Thanksgiving or Christmas or something like that. And then when it comes to downsizing, it's not just a table that's being moved, but it's the person's life and memories. And what they found is that as they started to downsize and move into these condominiums, the dining room that was built was just too small. It didn't fit the dining room table. And not that they have to move the exact same dining room table, but they started to discover that the developer was not in the business of building a place to live, but he was really in the business of moving lives. So what did they do? They made some adjustments. They took down the second bedroom size and made the dining room larger for a group of people who could fit the dining room that they had in their old place into the new place. But they also addressed it in the terms of this moving my life problem. And they built storage and they gave it free to anybody who bought the condominium for 2 years so that they could put their extra stuff there and make sure they had time to sort through it and come to terms with some memories and get these important items that we would look at as just objects into the right hands, either a family member, a relative, or a child. And therefore, this aspect of the move would not prevent the sale of the new condominium. After they did this, sales dramatically improved and all the needs were met. And that's where the house was not only meeting the functional needs of living, but the social and emotional needs of moving my life and making sure that I'm happy and my family's happy and my friends are happy as we start to live in this new place. So, a key question, how do you know if you have product market fit? Well, one objective measure that VCs look for, of course, is if you have sustained growth of 30% month over month. Not a spike growth, but sustained, which means your product is resonating with your target customer segment. Word of mouth has to be occurring, and a great customer satisfaction with the product is also present so that your product continues to get pulled out into the market, at least for these initial set of customers who are very much eager to use new and different products. So 30% sustained month over month growth is what would start to indicate that we're really onto something with this new product that this startup has created, and we're on our way. So this last question that I posed at the beginning for our lecture today, how does achieving product market fit and the sales acceleration method relate? Well, they relate in this very powerful way, where I started to identify with you all the need to have a perspective of the customer and then look back at your product as what my customer is hiring my product to do and does it meet not only the functional needs, but the emotional and social needs as well. That framework is carried forward into the sales acceleration method, which I mentioned at the very top of my lecture. And now it explicitly starts to look at the 30 things that customers really value when they buy anything. They still fall into the same categories of social, emotional, functional, but Bain has identified 6 key social needs, 10 key emotional needs, and 14 key functional needs that some combination of those make up why a customer will purchase your product. So we use that framework explicitly and specifically in the sales acceleration method to make sure we're honing our sales messaging to the needs of the customer, to make sure we move as quickly and efficiently as effective as possible to drive as much sales into the business as possible. So in our next lecture, we're going to be diving into the particulars of the sales acceleration method. And next time, we're going to talk about who are your target customers, how do you select them, and how do you make sure you're selecting the right target customers for your product. So until next time, thanks for listening.
Great. So we're done with the video. We're gonna start looking at questions now. If please make sure everybody, if you have any questions, please make sure you bring them up. There's a hand up.
I'd love to answer questions. Enrique, I don't have video. Same thing we did at the beginning. So
right.
I know you don't think I'm that good looking and you want to keep me off the screen, but you know, maybe somebody wants to see me talk.
All right, I'm gonna make you the host for now. Oh, the co-host. I think this works.
All right.
Does that work?
Let's see if I can.
Okay, I think you're coming up. Yeah. Okay.
Voila! Technology,
right.
amazing.
So I need to actually
let's see if we get some good questions.
Let me make sure I stop sharing my screen. Okay, great. All right, so I think. Okay, first question. When will part 2 be? This is where you get to find out about the social, emotional, and functional needs in detail.
Yeah, so our plan was to do this once a week, same time, same place, and just kind of march through in 5 lectures each of the materials. So in the next one, we're going to be starting to look at those identified and discrete social, functional, and emotional needs, which are very interesting. Not that I'm biased, but I think it's fascinating, having worked in the area for so long as I did, and these things come out, and it really helps to get startups, especially, to think about the proper way of positioning their product, both from a marketing and sales perspective. So I think it's the coolest thing. I give full attribution to Bain for great work. They're the same people who brought you Net Promoter Score, if you're familiar with that. But that's why I like this so much. So did that answer the question? Anything else?
I think it does. I would actually encourage people to just stay tuned for the follow-up emails on that. Do we have any other questions? I see there's 18 people here. We don't have any current questions. Maybe while that happens, we could dig a little bit deeply in some of these needs without giving away a lot from the next lecture, or anything else in particular you want to?
Well, I can mention some things. It's, I find one of the primary problems with startups, and we find this repeatedly as we go teach our accelerator classes, which takes people through a series of 8 to 12 weeks of a lot of intensive stuff. But, and by the way, I'm guilty of it too. I'm a computer engineer by training and created stuff early on in my career. You're in love with your own stuff. And if I'm talking to Enrique about something I worked on in my early career, was designing a reduced instruction set computer, which is kind of nerdy, I realize. But I thought it was very interesting in that we got these instructions down that could execute in only 1 clock cycle, as opposed to 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cycles. And we said, wow, if we can get the instruction operating in just 1 clock cycle, man, we can really stream with a lot of processing of work. And I would come up to Enrique and say, man, Enrique, look how cool this thing is. 1 clock cycle to move this operand from here to here. And I just have these simple instructions. I can do a complete database reshuffle with only 1/3 the instruction sets that may be needed in something else that has excess. Now, what I'm doing is I'm talking in engineering terms. That's not a good idea. All startups do it, and you can understand it. But what the framework starts to do is start to put it in terms of what Enrique needs. What does Enrique need? He needs to get his work done more quickly so he can go outside and play with his children. That's one need. That's a very powerful emotional need. Functionally, he may need to get his work done more quickly so that it meets a deadline so he looks better in his job for completing work more quickly and therefore gets promoted. So it's a functional need that leads into a social or an emotional need as well. So that's really where the framework really helps. And what I do in the class is we display the framework. First, everybody gets up and presents their startup and what they do. So add a question if you want me to stop talking. We can answer another question if you'd like. But I have everybody come up and talk about it. And it's very interesting because even in front of the class of other startups, and startups by definition, I think, are started by smart people. It's really fun to teach them because they're all very bright. It takes a lot of, extra psychological effort and intellectual effort to actually go and venture out and do that. So, but even that audience that's I consider incredibly bright has a hard time understanding other startups when they start to talk about what they do. And it's fascinating because they'll run on. And they'll run on for 4 or 5 minutes and people are just, I think I got it. But then we forced them through this framework. And I said, circle out of the 30 things that are listed, circle the things that you think your product addresses. It doesn't matter whether it's functional, emotional, social, let it fall wherever it is. And then once you circle them, you know, and be honest, but also be complete, then answer this question. And I put the word buy, ... So one thing that here's a couple of the functional, social, emotional needs. It's saves money, saves times, gives me security, gives me a sense of belonging, gives me access to information. These are all examples of what Bain discovered. So how do you circle them? Then I say, describe in one sentence and start by saying it saves time by, and then you describe it simply. And then it does this. And then I have everybody come up in the class and they restate what they do by only using that framework. I actually do something else. I also force them to describe their company in 7 words or less, and literally 7 words. It's a terrific exercise. But they said, hi, I'm from the Launchpad. We bring entrepreneurs to life. And then how do we do that? Well, we save them time by teaching them highly effective lessons learned in the startup environment. We allow them to have access to information by opening up our libraries. So you go through that, and then everybody in the audience turns around and goes, oh my God, that makes so much sense. That is really valuable. I can't understand why I didn't get that at the first time, but when you describe it like that, I can see why you're building this product. It's a huge value to society. And that's really what's so fun about the class and going through at least this part of the method, the other parts too, but especially this part, because people start to articulate their product correctly as if you're explaining it to your mother and, you know, who you need to say, why are you building this and what does it do? Okay. So at any rate.
Great. So I mean, I let you go on because I think what you were talking about addresses one of the questions that we have. Andre Nojo is asking a question. I'm going to allow him to talk. We're going to experiment with this. So Andre, you're going to be up now. I'm going to allow you to talk and ask the question. You're on.
Thank you, Enrique, and thank you, Richard. So my question is in regards to the product market fit. When do you, during that market fit process, when do you know that you have a product market fit with the customer journey? Because if you are a startup, probably you are not selling yet. You don't have that 30% growth of your product so that you know, but on the early stage, how can you figure out you get a product market fit?
Oh, well, that's the whole objective. It's the 30% number of growth sustained. So what we want to do is we want to, and that, earlier on, it's a little easier to get 30% because each incremental user jumps you a lot more. But that is the measure. And by the way, as you get larger, the 30% is not sustainable, and VCs know that. So if you're coming in for a Series A round, we're really looking probably something on the order of 50 to 100% growth per year. So it changes. It's still substantial growth, but the metric isn't there. But to know whether or not you have a product that's going to have a good chance at that, we want to see the 30% growth month over month. Okay. Even from the very inception. So if I understood your question correctly, hopefully I answered it correctly. Did that answer your question, or did I misinterpret it?
That answered it. Yes, okay. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Excellent. So we have another question from Juan Carlos Carrion. I'm going to allow him. Okay, Juan Carlos, you're on.
He still looks like he's muted.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Go ahead. No, I think he's muted himself.
Carrion and Jason.
No, I didn't intend that to happen. Let me see. Okay, Juan Carlos. Go ahead.
Both people on my screen are muted on their side, okay. I think.
Okay, so
unmute them.
Yeah, I think he's probably muted on his side. So let's see.
Well, here, let me unmute him. I think we can do that, can't you? Can't you pick on his?
No, I do, but nothing happens. I don't know what's going on.
Okay.
Hold on a second. Yeah, I think. Well, I can read the question. The question is here. If I can bring it up real quick, he says, for a double-sided marketplace model, do we focus on A, finding product market fit with primary user, final user first, or B, finding product market fit with the economic buyer who pays for our product? in a double-sided marketplace. See, so I mean, there's people who receive the services, right? And there's people who, if you have like a charity, let's say, you have donors on one side, and then you have recipients of the services, right?
Yeah, so
Those
let
are the
me
final users, and then the donors are the people that give the money. So that,
yeah,
I
so
guess
let me
that's
give you
essentially
let me
the
give two answers because that touches on two things we see all the time. One side is when you build a marketplace, that's a double-sided market, right? In that I need people who supply a component and then people who want the component, and you have to grow them both equally. But what you were just interpreting, Enrique, was, is there a difference between a buyer and a user, is usually how we classify it. And there is. Sometimes the economic buyer is also the user of the product. Sometimes the economic buyer, we call it economic buyer because they give us the money for the product, and the user are very different. So what's an example of that? Schools. So the principal or the superintendent of schools may buy something, a learning apparatus, tutorials, books. The users are the students. So when designing the product, though, we have to design it for the user. We have to make sure we have fit there because that won't drive the economic buyer to buy it. But what we often see is once we develop it for the user, we need to also make adjustments for the economic buyer. What's an example of that? Well, one company I was working with had some software that allowed people to track their nutritional intake and how at a gym and how well they were, complying with their workout schedule. So the user are people like us. We would go there, the gym would give us access to this application, and we could use it and say, oh, that's really cool. And then I can see my nutrition, my body mass, well, I'm keeping up. But the economic buyer it was being sold to gyms. And then this service was being provided to their users to attract more customers or to enhance loyalty of their customers. So there you have a difference between economic buyer and users, but we also needed to build features into and for the economic buyer so that the economic buyer got additional information that helped them understand their gym. When were people coming? What kind of apparatus were they using? What kind of services did they really value? So that's kind of like almost the data analytics side, but we first designed it. And by the way, this company all of a sudden started to jump to over 30% month-over-month growth. So it was really kind of fun to watch that journey as they figured it out. I'll take credit for showing them the framework and asking good questions. They get all the credit for building something incredible. So, and that's what happened. So the people used it, so the people got value, and then the gym with some of these additional capabilities also got value. So we had kind of features that met both sides. But to answer the question simply, design it for the users, because if the users don't like it, you're dead. It just doesn't go anywhere. But keep in mind that as you do have an economic buyer, you're going to have to probably meet some needs there too at some point in time. So hopefully that answered the question. Okay.
I think it does. We have another question from an anonymous attendee. It says, do you see a difference between goods and services? What are your suggestions if your product is a service similar to Launchpad? He says, how would you suggest marketing services to the market? When it's services, yeah.
Yes. So of course, when I was a partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers, we sold services, amorphic stuff. You really trust. Hey, Enrique, trust me. If you hire me and give me a lot of money, I'll make things really good for you. So that's really the tougher sell, as opposed to saying, hey, see my really cool phone? Want to buy it? You can do this. So it's a tougher sell. But I will tell you, the framework is exactly the same. And that's why Bain did the research, and why some people will look at it and say it's simple, but actually from my experience, it's actually excellent in all senses, because people buy for the same reasons. We need, access to information. We need to feel safe and secure. We need to leave a legacy for our children. There's an heirloom category here too. We need to improve our self-image. We need to improve our wellness. These are all the things that they've identified. So whether it's a service like a trainer, that's a service, right? Someone who's training me, it's there, it's ephemeral, it goes away, versus a product, same categories. It's fascinating. So I'll guarantee you, if you tune in next time, I hope you have the same enthusiasm for it I do, but it's really cool. And it will really help you think about your product and or service in the right way to get it out to the market. So to me, there's no difference. Go through the same exercise, identify the same things. But of course, recognizing amorphous or ephemeral products are by nature more difficult because I can't feel it, touch it, see it. It's really about trust. That becomes a trust sale at that point.
That makes a lot of sense. There's no additional questions here, but I have a couple of questions I could come up with. And so if you're ready to ask a question, please post it on the Q&A board and it'll be answered very quickly. So my question is, how do you, when there's a market that's totally not defined, right? That's too innovative. Something, it's like a new trend or things are changing very rapidly. There's a quote that I like to use a lot, in which they interviewed Jeff Bezos, and he says, you know, I pay a lot of money to my, you know, VP of operations and to my VP of marketing. I pay them tons of money so they can run this company, right? And they can take care of things as they are going on. My job, he says, is to work, you know, operating a quarter, 6 quarters into the future, right? I'm in the future. I'm looking around the corner to see what's coming next, you know, based on trends and how the world is changing. How do you do the homework to try to get in, you know, into that vision range and maybe find, you know, products or try to find product market fit for an idea that today is probably way ahead of its time? It's kind of a hard question, but I was wondering, you know, how do you approach that when there's it's things that they're not here yet, but you think they will be? How do you move forward?
So that's to me, Enrique?
Yes.
So, no, that's a great question. It's an interesting question because the other reason why, the number 3 reason actually, why startups fail is the product is too early. It's too early. In other words, great visionaries, we saw it. There's a couple products that predated Facebook. They were just too early in what they did to get the stickiness and the distribution. So, and what we call it there in our startup or entrepreneurial work with corporates is that the ecosystem has to be ready for it as well. So for example, if I came out with a new car that used air, oxygen to power itself, you're going to say, man, that's amazing. No pollution and air is free. But what I need for it to be viable is I need air stations all over the United States. So cars have gas stations. Electric cars need electric stations as part of the ecosystems. All products need an ecosystem. So when we are a little bit too early, the ecosystem isn't quite ready, and that's one of the reads that needs to happen, and it's also why products can fail. So nothing to do about it except, and I'll tell you what the corporate work we do, is that we help the corporates identify startups who are helping to build the ecosystem for a particular product they've come out with. So it increases its velocity into the marketplace. So that's one answer. The other answer is kind of hokey, but I think it's brilliant. At Y Combinator, and I know we're the launchpad, but I like quoting anything that's great. I'm a consultant, so I steal ideas from every single place, as long as I give attribution from where they came from. But I don't like not using an idea just because I didn't think of it. So Y Combinator has a phenomenal lecture by the guy who used to run Park Place. And if you remember Park Place from your history, it was the inventor of the mouse, of the network, and of Windows. And who visited there? Well, a lot of executives from Xerox visited there because it was theirs. And what happened? They didn't understand what they were looking at. The scientists there said, these guys are toner heads because all they understand is making copies. Steve Jobs visited there, and what happened? He understood within 3 or 4 minutes what he was looking at and said, I have to have this. And of course, he struck the deal, then upped the deal. But that was really the beginning of Windows, mouse, and networking out of Park Place. So the lab director, who's got on, but you can watch the 2 video lectures by him on Y Combinator on the website. He said, what I did, it sounds easy, but a lot of things that sound easy are actually very hard to do. He said, what we used to do is project ourselves into the future mentally and think about what we needed to create so that we would make life and society better. And it takes that thought. So Enrique, when you're quoting Bezos, he's doing the same thing. He's saying, let me get the day-to-day stuff off my back. Matter of fact, let me get the month-to-month stuff off my back. I want to think about the future and just really think about it hard. And that's a super smart and effective way to do it. And that's what all visionaries do. Bill Gates, Bezos, Jobs, any one of them all did the same thing, which actually means you need a very good number two in your company to handle the day-to-day. That's why the COO, and I'll go back to startups, why that's important. As they start to grow, you need a really good person to handle the day-to-day as you founder visionary, continue to think into the future to innovate. So did that answer your question, Enrique? Okay.
Yes, I think it did. And by the
All
way, you mentioned Park Place. It's also one of my favorite properties in the Monopoly game board.
There you go.
Okay. So I have a question. I mean, there's anybody else who wants to ask questions, please do so. In fact, if anybody has a questions, they don't want to be called on directly, they want to remain anonymous, I will not put you on, right? I will just ask the question. If that's what's keeping people from asking questions.
Yeah.
All right. So I was listening to another webinar yesterday about how VCs, right, invest in companies, and product and technology for early stage is only about 12% as important, right? The most important thing is the team, right? The second most important thing is the fit with the fund, which doesn't come to mind here, but the product is like a quarter of the importance of the team. So I guess my question is, you could have product market fit, but if you have the wrong team to move the company forward, you have nothing. You're dead in the water, right? So how does that, have you come across any, in your long experience with the startups at 500, for example, or anywhere else, have you come across teams that had a great product, but you figured out early on as a mentor, let's say, that this team has a great product, they don't really know what they're sitting on, but they're not the right team to move it forward, or they're missing this one part?
It's a pretty in-depth conversation. Now that I'm on the inside working at a VC, as well as serving as entrepreneur in residence down in Miami. So I'd love to see you guys if you're down in Miami. Stop by and see me. I love talking about mentoring and stuff. But to get back to this topic, it's a fascinating area in the sense of you want to make good investments, right? So a lot of, and the other interesting on the macroeconomic push, VCs are trying to get in earlier to companies. So they're scrambling, right? Before it was like, all right, they had product market fit and they're really growing nicely, let's make an investment. But now there's competition. There's so much competition. There's so much money out. Oh, I got to find you earlier so I don't overpay for my stake. I give you 150, get 7%. And then pretty soon it's worth, $10 million in 2-3 years. And then I get attached onto series A and B and C, and we're off to a unicorn. So what does that mean? It means that a lot of people are taking estimates and due diligence to try to find out. Enrique just approached me. He has a company with a product, looks pretty decent. I go do some due diligence on Enrique and his team. But you know what? The harsh reality is, whatever I see from Enrique and his team, it's like dating. It's in the honeymoon. They're going to put on their best behavior. So you asked me, have I seen it? Yes, we take a lot of time. I'm teaching a growth program in a couple of weeks down in Miami for 500. We have, over 170 applicants for 20 positions so far. But we're going through interviews, and what we're trying to find out is, do they have the right mix? So to answer one of your questions directly, what's the most important? Well, it comes down to this. The product can pivot any number of times. Smart people, if you're open to it, can help you make changes. If you have a broken team, personalities, relationship, I can't fix it. The only way to fix it is to fire you and bring somebody else in, which, by the way, another harsh reality, within 5 years, I think 50 or 60% of the CEOs are replaced by the VC. So that's just a harsh reality. So understand where you fit and what's important. But Enrique, you're right. The dynamics are critical. The minimum rule is, if you're going to come to me for money, I need to see that you've worked together for a minimum of 6 months. But I really like it if you were school pals, work together, have great dynamics. Airbnb is an example. They all graduated from the Rhode Island School of Design together. 5 years later, they got together in LA and then up in San Francisco. And they had great personal dynamics. And if you hear the lectures about how they talk to each other, it's always like, oh my God, this guy Enrique, he's amazing. I'm so proud just to be working with him. That's how they talk about each other. And that's what you look for. I must have that. And I will also tell you, as smart as I think I am, and I was just talking about it with the selection committee just the other day down at in 500. is we had a couple people came through and they looked beautiful. The product was great. The team looked great. The CEO looked great. But I will tell you, we were fooled. After going through the class, boy, it was just such a difference. So what we've done is we've adopted a new policy at 500. We actually run you through, we select you, but then we run you through a growth program. We put a little stress on you to try to figure out some critical elements, and we will help you. It's a real benefit to you. But by seeing you in real world conditions, it's what Carl Jung said, you know, that psychologist way back. He said, under stress, the true personality appears. So when putting these companies through this, and then we do growth experiments with them afterwards to see how well they take on our advice and how they're doing, we actually start to see the true group. And then we make much smarter investment decisions. So hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah.
Not too long-winded.
No, we have another 8 minutes. Please post your
Another 8
questions.
minutes.
Or otherwise I need to continue to come up with these questions. So I do have another question, and it goes back
Enrique,
to,
you never run out of questions. It's amazing.
Yeah. It goes back to, I think it was earlier this week or maybe the end of last week, you and I were sitting together mentoring this one entrepreneur who had a prototype. He had his idea. We've seen this a lot, right? And without disclosing obviously any of the details, but you know, we had an idea. And I've seen this a lot, by the way, you know, people have a product they came up with, they're in love with it. They want to put it through a crowdsourcing, you know, round, right? They want to, you know, put it on the market it based on the fit that they see the product has with the market. I also came across, you know, years ago, to one of our first cohorts at the accelerator program I was running, we had somebody walk in with a prototype, with a production prototype. And it was for this device. How do you approach somebody that comes with that? You know, and I've seen this many times, you know, somebody that comes in, the first thing obviously I ask, okay, how many customer discovery interviews did you carry out, right? How many people have you shown this to, and try to get in a non-core, you know, in a non-leading way feedback. How do you take somebody who's really, you know, devoted a lot of passion and time to their idea and tell them, hey, you know, have you really figure this out before, right? I mean, we come across this a lot, right? And you don't want to discourage them at the same time. And I know on the session that we had, we talked about the use cases for the product. This was a particular product that could have been dangerous in one scenario, but very useful in another one, right? If you recall. And then, so how do you go about approaching something like that? No.
Yeah.
And what do you tell to entrepreneurs that want to just go ahead, develop a product, get 3D printed models, you know, put it out there and try to raise funds through crowdsourcing and try to take it to market?
Right.
You know,
so you're talking about physical manifestations or models,
physical products
or something,
yeah,
versus the application, which is a software manifestation.
Well, I've seen those too, but you know, what do you?
Yeah. So, but it really draws me down to the other thing that's I'm actually surprised at after through my career. What I find that another thing that startups don't do as nearly as well as they should, and I find one maybe out of 100 or 200 that do this well, and that is talk to customers. For some reason, people love to keep looking maybe at data, inferences, my own beliefs, my own thoughts, when the only thing that counts is what the customer says, and more important than that is what the customer will pay for. And that's the difference between a prototype and a minimal viable product. This is all before product market fit, that everyone's going to tell you, oh yeah, this is really cool. Thanks, Enrique. You gave me a little holder here for my, my 3M notes that sits there. The only determining question though is, will you pay for it? Will you pay? It's $4.99. Will you pay for it? And if the answer is no, then you don't have a minimal viable product. So I'm combining a couple things, but talk to customers. I see that all the time, and we keep hammering them. You have to talk to customers. You have to find the right ones. As I talked about in my lecture, we got to get to the right large customer base that has a need for your product. And sometimes it really surprises you. Like NyQuil, was geared, it's geared toward people with colds, and it had a sleeping medicine in it. But then they found out, oh my God, all these people are buying NyQuil just to sleep. So they created or actually it was Dayquil. Sorry, I reversed it. It was Dayquil with the cold medicine. So they had to invent a new product. In that case, it's a good problem to have because they found another large customer segment. They made NyQuil just for them, just a sleeping medicine. When they were a cold remedy company, they turned out to be a sleeping company as well. What business are they in? So talk to customers is so, so important. And I see them, people are afraid, they don't approach it enough, or they don't ask the right questions, or when they do talk to customers, they want to sell you. Because again, as an engineer, I fell into the same trap. I built this really cool remote control, and I'm saying, oh my God, what do you think of it? Oh yeah, I really like something to do picture in picture. Oh, my remote does that. Oh yeah, it does. You just do this and this, and it really does that, and there's some other features. See, I have to be quiet. What would you like to see? And if you can't discover the picture in picture, that's my failure. I need to be quiet and write it down because the customer couldn't discover what's really needed or what a major feature was. So talk to customers is one of my major messages. Focus groups, super important, individual customer meetings, and then the third most important are surveys because they're very narrow in what information you can get because it's dependent on what question you're asking. Focus groups, open-ended questions, get some good answers and discussions. Super, super important for making sure you're down the right path.
Yeah, and then there's a comment, actually, another question. Maybe we want to address it quickly because I think it has to do with the causation and correlation that you were talking about earlier. The person says, I disagree that bad team dynamics is the primary cause of failure. It's really a symptom of no product market fit, not the cause. So
that could happen in some cases, but I think of companies, and I've always thought I've worked as I've led large teams. It's like a marriage. You actually spend more time with your coworkers than you do your spouse, if you think about it. Mm-hmm. And if you don't have a good relationship, even with your spouse, it's really hard to stay in the same space, right? So very true. When you have pressure on you, that could be a symptom of why people get at each other. But what we're looking at is when there's a power dynamic that's not correct, and we see that. There's some really, I've seen it where there's a great CTO or a great head of marketing, but the CEO is dominating too much. You need to let those ideas percolate. Or I've seen husband and wife teams come in who were really good. And after a while, then we started to see the schism that was there because actually they were divorced and they got back to do this. But that was holding them back from growth. And you can create a hobby business, you can create a successful business, but I'm speaking from a VC perspective because make no mistake, what I'm looking at is a 30 times return on my money in 7 years. So I'm looking for unicorns. That's my mission. I'm not looking, this became a really nice neighborhood, hobby shop. Not my business as a VC. I'm looking for a 30 times return on my money in 7 years. And ideally a unicorn that becomes worth $1 billion. Otherwise, that's not my game. It's not what VCs are in the business to do. VCs collect money from other people. So you trusted me with it. Now I got to find really good places to put it. And I want to maximize its growth. So that team dynamics to us, super important. It could manifest for other reasons, but there's also, different things. And this related to one other thing. I know we're running out of time, but be generous with the equity that you give. The other thing we look for is an even spread of equity. If someone has 80%, somebody else has 10 and 10, not a good dynamic because we're really looking at from here on out for the next 7 years. It's going to be hard work. Are we motivating everybody properly? I don't care what you did before to get to this point, but I want those super important people who you only gave 10 and 10 equity to be as equally motivated as you. And I'll tell you, resentment will build. So we're looking for even split of equity between 2 and 4 founders is ideal. Lone founders, sometimes, but we don't like it. So between 2 and 4, mostly technical, and a nice even spread of equity so everyone's in the ball game with a pool of money for those key employees as you bring them in. So I just thought I'd share that if anybody were interested on a VC perspective in that regard.
Okay, and I think that's important because everybody, as you said, everybody talks about product market fit. When you really achieve it and you have a gangbusters product, that is great, right? And if you're growing 30%, month over month, but that's when all your troubles really start, right? How to manage that growth, right? How to put the right people in place. You want, instead of having, loyalty in your team, as you're scaling, you want people who are going to actually execute, right? So you start getting rid of, putting your friends in the at the helm, and then just getting the right people into the team, right? So this is just the beginning, right? This is a very dynamic process. It's a process, that has a ton of moving parts, and that's why, unicorns are, few and far between, right? Because it has to be a number of things and stars aligning so that you really hit it big, right?
Hard work. So I want to be respectful of everybody's
okay.
time.
Yes.
So thank you for everybody who stuck with us. So I appreciate that. I love answering these questions. So does Enrique. And, you know, if any follow-ups outside of this, feel free to ping us up at the University of Miami. But otherwise, Enrique, you can tell them when the next one's coming up, but I'm anxious to share more of my material with everybody here on this call and some others.
Great. Thank you, Dick. And just stay tuned. You know, within a week, probably we'll have it next week. I know it's the long weekend. We're trying to figure out if we're going to keep it on Wednesdays or Thursdays. We'll see. But just stay tuned. You're going to get an email, and you know, through the different networks that we have, we're going to get the word out about the next part 2 of this Launch and Learn series with Richard McDonald. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of the afternoon.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.